I said that you can read all the necessary information on the website, right? Once you activate your account, there you'll see there's return trade. You will click on it. There are 3 horizontal lines. You'll click on it, then click on trade, and you'll read everything, what is necessary, all the precautions, everything.
Welcome to Time to Call Out Fraud. I'm Ainsley Cunningham, Manager of Education and Communications with the Manitoba Securities Commission. And the audio you're hearing now is the sound of a fraudster trying to pressure someone into putting money into an investment scam.
That's why I'm saying that everything is there on the website. You can read it on your own as well.
Yeah, maybe just I'd like
and because whenever everything is legal, everything is just put on the website, so you can read it.
Using pressure and manipulation to trap their victims, scammers don't discriminate. They target people from their 20s to their 80s and everywhere in between. In this episode of the series, we're going to investigate how different demographics are singled out by scammers. And we'll explore how, while fraud has an impact on many people, some groups are more at risk than others. You might have an image in your head of the typical fraud victim as an older person. As we'll hear in a little bit, that isn't always true. But unfortunately, older adults do make up a significant portion of those targeted by fraud. More than half of all fraud victims in Canada are over 50. And Laura Tamblin-Watts, CEO of National Seniors Advocacy Organization CanAge, says there are a number of reasons for that.
There's a generation that didn't slam the door. There's a generation that didn't hang up the phone. There's good manners and there's politeness and there's hospitality. And I think that's especially true for people who grew up a long time ago in communities that really had to take care of each other, where someone on the road who looks like they need help, you would pull over and ask them as opposed to passing right by. And so that manifests itself by answering the door, answering the phone, responding to the text message, sitting down for that cup of coffee within that closed community with that person and listening to them. And that is the way in.
Another consequence of growing up in a different time is that many older adults are more likely to trust a business or investment opportunity that looks legitimate.
They may not know that they've fallen victim to fraud. If it's a very good fraud, they may think that whatever they're doing is quite legitimate. And in some cases will remain convinced of that for years and actually turn against people who are trying to help them, because the fraudster is professional, right? You may think that, your adult children and your friends are just meddling in your business, and that, frauds only work because they're really good. It's the ultimate capital market. The minute a fraud or a fraudster isn't good at their job or good at the scam, then they're out. One of the other things is they may be using social mechanisms against them. So it can be really hard if someone shows up with a clipboard and they've got a panel van and they've got documents and everything looks good. We come from an era where older people believe that those things could really only happen with legitimate businesses. And so, well, how could it be? Because they have all of these purchased merchandise, they have websites that look wonderful, they've got email addresses and so on. The last is, if you have been abused or neglected, if you are angry or worried, if you're frightened, or you're in a position where you're going to have to make a decision you don't want, like you maybe can't live at home by yourself anymore, and you're worried that you'll have to go to long-term care, people are more open, and that gets taken advantage of. So if you're trying desperately, if you think if you only had some more money to modify your house, or if the modification to the house was cheaper, this investment scheme is going to have 25%, where you're only getting like 3% with your regular, you're going to jump on it. You're more likely to do it. The last piece is, if you actually do have some type of cognitive impairment, like a delirium, a depression, you're on medications, or you have some form of dementia, those of course lower inhibitions and affect the ability to understand and appreciate. And I just want to flag that one piece around dementia. Many people only diagnose the dementia about 10 years after inhibitions are dropping. So we talk about mild cognitive impairment, and the first thing that goes is executive functioning for abstract finance. So investments are the very best type of fraud or scheme to go at for people with the least evident dementia.
It's important to note that older adults aren't the only people who are at risk. In fact, a 2015 report by the International Organization of Securities Commissions found that overconfident middle-aged men are most likely to be victims of investment fraud. And there are risks for young people too. Winnipeg consulting psychologist Dr. Moira Summers says she sees young people affected by scams involving new technologies like cryptocurrency.
I'm really concerned about some of the cryptocurrency, blockchain stuff that it has a tone, I don't quite know how to describe it, almost of anarchy. Like, let's stick it to the man, let's stick it to the system, let's do things that are outside how things are normally done, because we're never going to get a shake in life. We're never going to have the opportunity to have a good life unless we grab it and take it. So I'm seeing a younger demographic in some of the cryptocurrency scams. You see this also just in things like day trading, things that are perfectly legal, but very high risk, that you have people who are looking to get quick money, and who have been, often there's a kind of a pyramid, a laddering scheme involved in some of those, where people recruit other people to come in underneath them in these day trading or investment schemes. And they're getting unsophisticated followers who are putting in money and who are either temporarily, genuinely getting some positive returns, or it's a fraud from the beginning, and those returns are just digital, fakery. But over COVID in particular, we've seen lots and lots of promotion of day trading things, sometimes with a view to, in this kind of anarchy subculture of let's influence how stock markets happen, or let's influence the fortunes of a particular company in order to make a statement, as well as in order to make a buck. Right. So that's what I see among the younger folks. And they can end up creating this message that if you're not doing this, I see this a lot on TikTok and Instagram, that if you're not involved in this, that somehow you're a dupe, that somehow you're not current, and you're just a sheep for believing that you could, do normal kinds of schooling, working, investing, and that if you're not doing this other sexier looking stuff, that you're missing out in big ways, in important ways, and here's the tip off, in the foolproof ways of making a quick buck.
Yet even though everyone is vulnerable to investment fraud, the consequences for older adults are undeniably severe. Laura Tamblin-Watts.
There's a number of different impacts. We've seen that there have been studies done in British Columbia that said if you suffer a loss of $20,000 or more as a later person, it could take up to 18 months off of your life. So it has a profound effect. And that's just some of the physiological and social effects. It has a huge impact on a person's confidence and the level of ability that they feel to act in the world. So getting defrauded will make them often very nervous and anxious. We'll see people retreat into themselves and back into their homes, so they withdraw socially. I remember a particular case, and I'm going to call her Mary. She had all of the resources that you could imagine at her fingertips. She had worked in the financial sector, and She had enough money in her mind and she was quite stable. She lived in a place that was just outside of the central Toronto, and her house had appreciated. So she had paid off her home and it was worth about $750,000. So she was, in a well-established position. She had 3 adult children who cared for her and good relationships. She got hooked by a predatory scam. And it was one where a relationship was being groomed. It was actually a phishing kind of scam, which then turned into a romance scam and then diversified because the same people were not just running the romance scam, but they were also now running an investment scam. Now, she didn't know that they were the same people in the back end, but of course, the information was being shared. She had her health really deteriorate. And one of the adult children who was in finance came to me and she was asking about her mother's health. And I said, I actually don't know if this is a health issue. It feels to me like there's something financial. And at that moment, it crystallized when I had a sit down with her and she just collapsed. She couldn't tell her children because she felt so embarrassed. And we got down to it. She had actually been going to the financial institution that she had gone to for a long time. And she actually took out $30,000 in cash. This is a woman who had only been taking out modest amounts. And she did that over the course of 2 weeks and was draining her money. And then it went to the investments. So then she started cashing in investments. The bank decided to put its flags up, but that didn't cross over to the investment sector. So when she went into her investments and started cashing out her investments in large chunks, then that started happening. And then the online investing started. So what would happen is, of course, they got a hold of her online information and they started taking over her online investment accounts and draining her that way. And it wasn't until she was mortgaging her house that we realized that she'd lost just under $1 million in the course of about 4 months. She went from a person who was healthy and vibrant and socially engaged to a person who had retreated, was embarrassed, and she became just this frail shell of herself. And she was terrified because there were threats and she didn't know how to get out of it. And her health suffered enormously. And, the first people that we needed to talk to was, of course, the police. The second people were social workers to try to help emotionally stabilize her and to help her have the conversation with her family, who was nothing but supportive. And I kept thinking, if this could happen to Mary, this could happen to anyone.
Situations like these are why Connie Newman, consultant with the Manitoba Association of Senior Centres and the Age-Friendly Manitoba Initiative, says it's important to get older adults talking about fraud.
The greatest risk is lack of awareness of how easy it is to happen. And tied into that is isolation. There are many older people that are not talking to others on a regular basis. Sometimes there's no family near them. And older people don't talk about money the way they should, because it was nobody's business back in the day about how much money I had and how much money I need, because it was a real private issue. That privacy is getting many people of all ages in trouble because we don't talk about it, we don't ask questions. And it's okay if you got caught. It's not okay to not tell somebody. And it goes back to tell stories. Sit around a coffee table at a senior center and just talk about the scam, the current scam. Because it's like in grade school, you go down a line and you tell a child at the beginning of the line and the story in the ear. By the time it gets to the end of the line, the story is embellished. It's totally different from the initial story, but it gets people talking what investment fraud is, what phone scams are, and it all goes back to Do not trust people you can't see. And if you can't see them and you think you trust them, ask somebody. Call Manitoba Securities. Call Connie Newman. There's all kinds of ways to find information, but we need to ask and we need to tell.
That's it for this episode of Time to Call Out Fraud. Thanks for listening. Please leave a review and share to help spread the message and shed some light on these fraudsters. Next time on the podcast, we'll hear about an investment scam that was once popular and how regulators and victims brought it to an end.
I was caught up in it. I really didn't realize it was a scam until the money was gone. So, I kind of had some red flags on the way, but when you're under a little bit of financial stress, you kind of push those worries aside a little bit.
That's next time on Time to Call Out Fraud.